Marcus Ashford stood at his office window, watching rain streak down the glass like tears he refused to shed. His phone buzzed for the 7th time that hour. Another nanny agency. Another rejection. "Mr. Ashford, I'm terribly sorry, but we simply cannot provide any more candidates," the woman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Your children have gone through 43 nannies in 18 months. Our reputation is at stake." Marcus closed his eyes. 43. The number hung in the air like an accusation. He disconnected the call without responding and turned to face his assistant, Gerald, who stood in the doorway with the expression of a man delivering news of a terminal illness. "Sir, the Henderson agency also declined. That was our last option in the tri-state area." The billionaire tech mogul who had built an empire from nothing, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast, was defeated by 4 children under the age of 7. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't destroying his life. His quadruplets, Sophia, Mason, Oliver, and Emma, had become legendary in childcare circles. The beautiful children with angelic faces and demonic behavior. Since their mother Catherine died 2 years ago in that senseless car accident, they had transformed from normal, happy children into 4 tiny tornadoes of chaos and heartbreak. The nannies never lasted more than a week. The record was 3 days. Mrs. Patterson had lasted only 6 hours before fleeing the mansion with mascara streaming down her face, muttering about superglue in her hair conditioner and plastic wrap over the toilet seat. But Marcus knew the pranks were just symptoms of a deeper wound. His children were drowning in grief, and he had no idea how to save them. He had tried everything. Child psychologists who the children refused to speak to. Play therapists whose offices the children destroyed. Grief counselors who emerged from sessions looking more traumatized than their young patients. Every expert said the same thing: the children needed stability, patience, and someone who genuinely cared. But how could anyone care when faced with such relentless hostility? Marcus walked through his mansion that evening, past the grand staircase where Catherine once stood in her wedding dress, past the playroom that now looked like a war zone, past the family portraits that seemed to mock him with their frozen happiness. He paused outside the children's bedrooms, listening to the silence that felt more ominous than peaceful. Tomorrow was Monday. He had meetings in Tokyo, conference calls with London, a merger that required his immediate attention. And he had no one to watch his children. The private school had suspended them again after Oliver released mice in the cafeteria. His own mother, their grandmother, had declared them unmanageable after Mason programmed all her devices to play circus music at random intervals. He was out of options, out of ideas, and running on fumes. The doorbell rang at 8:30, an unusual time for visitors. Gerald answered it while Marcus poured himself a bourbon he wouldn't drink, a nightly ritual of contemplating oblivion he never quite reached. "Sir, there's someone here about the nanny position." Marcus nearly dropped his glass. "We don't have a position listed." "I know, sir. She says she heard about the situation and wanted to offer her services." Desperation makes fools of brilliant men. Marcus agreed to the interview, expecting another bright-eyed graduate with child development theories and zero real-world experience. What he got instead was Riley Cooper. She was nothing like the polished professionals agencies sent. Mid-20s, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No designer handbag, no perfectly manicured nails, no rehearsed smile. Her eyes were intelligent and direct, meeting his without the usual mixture of awe and intimidation people showed in his presence. "Mr. Ashford, I'll be straight with you," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk without waiting for an invitation. "I'm not from an agency. I'm a hospice worker at Children's Memorial Hospital. I heard about your situation from a colleague whose sister works at the Henderson agency. I'd like to help." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "You work with dying children, and you want to spend your free time with my terrors? Are you a masochist, Miss Cooper?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I work with children who are fighting the hardest battle of their lives, Mr. Ashford. Your children are fighting too. They're just fighting different demons. I understand loss. I understand pain. And I understand that sometimes the worst behavior comes from the deepest hurt. When can I start?" Riley arrived at 7 the next morning, carrying a worn backpack and an expression of calm determination that Marcus found both reassuring and unsettling. She declined his offer of a formal tour, waving away Gerald's attempt to explain the mansion's security system and the children's elaborate schedule. "I'd rather meet them first," she said simply. "Everything else is just details." The quadruplets were already awake, plotting in Sophia's room. Marcus could hear their whispered voices through the door, conspiratorial and gleeful. He recognized that tone. Some poor soul was about to have a very bad day. "Perhaps I should warn you," Marcus began, but Riley was already opening the door. 4 pairs of identical blue eyes turned toward her. Catherine's eyes, Marcus thought with the familiar stab of grief. The children looked like cherubs painted by Renaissance masters, golden curls, perfect features, expressions of absolute innocence that masked calculating minds. "Good morning," Riley said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her, leaving Marcus in the hallway. He moved toward the door, ready to intervene, but Gerald placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Let's see what happens, sir." What happened was nothing. For exactly 5 minutes, there was silence. Then Sophia's voice, clear and cold, "You're not our mother. You can't replace her." Marcus couldn't hear Riley's response, but whatever she said made Oliver laugh, actually laugh, a sound Marcus hadn't heard in months. Then Mason's voice, challenging, "We don't need another nanny. We've made 43 of them quit. What makes you special?" More murmuring. Then Emma, the youngest and quietest, asked something in her tiny voice. Riley's response was lost in the sound of furniture moving. Marcus pressed his ear to the door, abandoning all pretense of giving them privacy. Gerald did the same. "She's moving the bookshelf," Gerald whispered. "Why would she?" The door opened suddenly, and both men stumbled slightly. Riley stood there, eyebrows raised. "Gentlemen, listening at doors? Really?" Marcus straightened, dignity in tatters. "I was just worried. I know. The children and I have an understanding now. We're going to spend the morning in the art studio. We'll need supplies, canvases, paints, clay, anything creative. Also, I'm taking them to the cemetery at 2 o'clock. "The cemetery?" Marcus repeated, stunned. "Miss Cooper, I don't think. They haven't visited their mother's grave since the funeral. That's a problem we're going to fix today." She turned back to the children. 30 minutes to get dressed and meet me downstairs. Comfortable clothes that can get messy." She walked past Marcus, headed for the art studio, leaving him standing in the hallway with his mouth open. Behind him, his children scrambled to get ready, moving with a purpose he hadn't seen in 2 years. The morning passed in surreal quiet. No screaming, no crashes, no emergency calls from frantic staff members. Marcus tried to work, failed, and found himself wandering toward the art studio around 10:30. He stopped in the doorway, frozen by what he saw. His children were painting. Not just random splashes of color, but actual pictures. Sophia was creating something dark and stormy, her brush strokes angry and bold. Mason worked on a portrait that looked heartbreakingly like Catherine. Oliver painted what appeared to be a house on fire, while Emma's canvas showed a little girl sitting alone in a vast empty space. Riley moved between them, not directing or correcting, just observing and occasionally asking quiet questions. "Tell me about this part, Emma. What's she feeling? Mason, do you remember that day? Oliver, is that fear or anger in those flames?" They were painting their grief, their rage, their loss. And Riley was witnessing it all without flinching. At 2 o'clock, they piled into Marcus's SUV. He insisted on driving, unwilling to let this stranger take his children somewhere so emotionally charged without him. Riley didn't argue. The cemetery was quiet, dappled with autumn sunlight. Catherine's grave sat beneath an oak tree, exactly as Marcus remembered because he came here every week, always alone, always in secret. "Your father visits every Thursday," Riley told the children as they stood before the headstone. "He sits here and tells your mother about you. About Sophia's straight A's, about Mason's science fair project, about Oliver's soccer goals, about Emma's drawings. He tells her he misses her. He tells her he's trying his best, but he doesn't know if it's enough." 4 small heads turned to stare at Marcus. He felt exposed, raw. "How?" he started. "The groundskeeper," Riley said softly. "He's my uncle. He told me about the sad man who comes every week to talk to his wife's grave. I didn't know it was you until yesterday." Sophia stepped forward first, her hand reaching for the cold marble. "Mommy, I'm sorry we've been bad. We just miss you so much." Her voice cracked, and suddenly all 4 children were crying, really crying, not the angry tantrums or manipulative tears, but genuine, wrenching sobs. Marcus dropped to his knees and pulled them close, his own tears finally falling. Riley stepped back, giving them space, her eyes wet but her expression steady. They stayed until the sun began to set, talking and crying and remembering together for the first time since Catherine died. The change wasn't immediate or magical. The children didn't transform into angels overnight. But something fundamental had shifted, like a locked door finally creaking open. Tuesday morning brought the first test. Riley found super glue in her shampoo bottle. Instead of screaming or quitting, she walked into the kitchen where the quadruplets were eating breakfast, held up the bottle, and smiled. Nice try. Classic misdirection. You knew I'd check my hair products after what happened to Mrs. Patterson, so you figured I'd let my guard down with shampoo. The glue in the conditioner was obvious. This was the real trap. I'm impressed by the tactical thinking, Mason. Mason's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. How did you know it was me? The precision. Sophia would have gone for something more dramatic. Oliver would have added food coloring for visual impact. Emma would have felt too guilty. You're the strategic one. The chess player. Riley poured herself coffee. So here's the deal. You can keep trying to make me quit, or you can channel that creative energy into something more interesting. Your choice. But I'm not going anywhere. Oliver leaned forward. What kind of interesting? Ever built a robot? Your dad's company has a workshop full of equipment gathering dust. I bet we could create something amazing. By afternoon, the 4 children and Riley were elbow-deep in circuits and metal, building what Mason insisted would be a functional rover. Marcus watched from his office via the security cameras Gerald had reluctantly pulled up on the monitor. She's remarkable, Gerald murmured. She doesn't try to control them. She just redirects their energy. Marcus nodded, unable to look away from the screen. Riley was showing Emma how to solder, her hands steady and patient. When Emma burned her finger slightly, Riley didn't panic or coddle. She ran it under cold water, put on a bandage, and asked if Emma wanted to continue. His youngest daughter nodded, determined, and went right back to work. That evening, Riley stayed for dinner. It wasn't planned, but when Emma asked her to, she simply called to cancel her other plans and joined them at the massive dining table that usually felt absurdly empty. Tell us about the hospital, Sophia demanded. Dad says you work with kids who are dying. Marcus nearly choked on his water. Sophia, that's not appropriate dinner conversation. It's fine, Riley interrupted. And yes, I do. I work in pediatric palliative care. I help children who are very sick feel more comfortable and less afraid. Are they scared? Emma whispered. Sometimes. Mostly they're incredibly brave. Braver than most adults I know. They teach me something every single day about courage and living in the moment. Riley set down her fork. One of my patients, a boy named Carlos, is 7. He has terminal brain cancer. Last week, he told me his biggest regret was never learning to skateboard. So yesterday, we built a ramp in the hospital hallway, and he rode a board for the first time while his doctors cheered. He could have gotten hurt, Oliver protested. He's dying anyway, Riley said gently. Would you rather live a short life afraid of everything, or live it doing the things that make you feel alive? The question hung in the air. Marcus saw his children processing it, their sharp minds working through implications beyond their years. Is that why you're not afraid of us? Mason asked. Because we're not actually scary compared to death. Riley laughed, really laughed. Oh, you're plenty scary. You're intelligent, creative, hurting, and angry. That's a dangerous combination. But I'm not here because I'm unafraid. I'm here because I understand that your behavior isn't about me. It's about loss and fear and not knowing how to process feelings that are too big for your bodies. I get that. And I'm not going anywhere until you're ready for me to go. Sophia pushed back from the table abruptly. May I be excused? Marcus nodded, concerned. She ran from the room, and he started to follow, but Riley caught his arm. Give her a minute. She needs to feel it. 10 minutes later, Sophia returned. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I broke Mrs. Patterson's glasses on purpose. I told her it was an accident, but I threw them against the wall. I've broken or ruined something belonging to every nanny who's been here. I wanted them to hurt like we hurt. The confession fell like a stone into still water. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Thank you for telling me, Riley said quietly. That took real courage. Aren't you mad? I'm sad. Sad that you've been carrying that guilt. Sad that you felt you had no other way to express your pain. But mad? No. You're a child dealing with an impossible situation. The adults in your life should have helped you find better ways to cope. That's on us, not you. Mason stood up too. I'm the one who programmed the smart house to lock Mrs. Chen in the basement. Everyone thought it was a malfunction, but it was me. I wanted her to be trapped like I felt trapped. Oliver followed. I put the mice in the cafeteria because Mom used to volunteer there. I wanted to ruin it because she's not there anymore. Emma's voice was barely audible. I pretend I can't hear people sometimes. It makes them go away faster. I made Miss Rodriguez cry because I ignored her for 3 whole days. The confessions poured out, 2 years of secrets and guilt and pain finally finding voice. Marcus sat frozen, devastated by the depth of his children's suffering and his own blindness to it. Riley didn't judge or lecture. She listened to every word, acknowledged every hurt, and when they finished, she said simply, "You've been through something terrible, and you've been surviving the only way you knew how. But there are better ways. Healthier ways. I'm going to teach you those ways, but only if you want to learn. Do you?" 4 heads nodded. "Then let's start tomorrow. Real talk, real feelings, real healing. But tonight, I think you owe your dad an apology. He's been trying to help you, and you've been punishing him for something that wasn't his fault." 3 weeks into Riley's tenure, Marcus realized he was in trouble. Not with his children, they were thriving, laughing, engaging with the world again. The trouble was that he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had brought light back into his shattered family. He watched her teach Emma to bake cookies using Catherine's recipe, the one he'd locked away because it hurt too much to remember. He observed her refereeing soccer matches in the backyard where Mason's analytical mind clashed with Oliver's competitive spirit. He listened to her discussions with Sophia about art and literature and growing up female in a complicated world. Riley fit into their lives like a piece that had always been missing, and the realization terrified him. "You're falling for her," Gerald said one morning, his tone carefully neutral. Marcus didn't bother denying it. "It's inappropriate. She works for me. She's younger than me. It's been barely 2 years since Catherine died. Every rational part of my brain is screaming that this is wrong. And the irrational part wants to ask her to dinner, to tell her she's extraordinary, to explore whatever this connection is that I feel every time she walks into a room." Marcus rubbed his face. "I can't do that to her. She's here for the children, not for me. If I make this complicated, she might leave, and I can't let that happen. They need her." But need had a way of becoming complicated. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Riley had stayed late to help Sophia prepare for a school presentation. Marcus was working in his study when he heard music playing, Catherine's favorite song, the one they danced to at their wedding. He found Riley and the children in the living room. Sophia was showing Riley pictures from her parents' wedding, stories tumbling out about the mother she was terrified of forgetting. "She looks beautiful here," Riley said softly, studying a photo of Catherine laughing at something off camera. "You can see the joy radiating from her. Tell me more about her. What was her laugh like?" "Like bells," Emma said. "Daddy used to say her laugh was like church bells on Sunday morning." Marcus stood in the doorway, transported back to a time when his wife was alive and his children were whole and the future seemed bright and uncomplicated. The grief hit him like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. Riley's eyes found his. She saw everything, the pain, the longing, the guilt that he was starting to feel something for someone else, the fear that moving forward meant leaving Catherine behind. "Kids, why don't you go wash up for dinner?" she said gently. "I need to talk to your dad for a minute." When they were alone, she crossed the room and did something nobody had dared to do in 2 years. She pulled Marcus into a hug. Not romantic, not sexual, just a simple human gesture of comfort from someone who understood loss. He broke. 2 years of holding himself together, of being strong for his children, of pretending he had any idea what he was doing, it all shattered. He buried his face in her shoulder and sobbed like the lost child he felt like. Riley held him through it, not speaking, not shushing, just being present for his pain the way she was present for his children's. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered when he could finally speak. "Be their father and mother both. Be enough. Be what they need. You don't have to be both parents. You just have to be the best version of their father you can be. And Marcus, you're doing better than you think. Your children are brilliant and creative and resilient because of you. Catherine's death didn't break them, it wounded them, deeply, but you've kept them alive and fighting. That counts for everything." She pulled back to look at him, her hands on his shoulders. "But you need to grieve too. You've been so busy taking care of them that you haven't taken care of yourself. You're running on empty." "I don't have time to fall apart." "Then make time. Take tomorrow. I'll stay with the kids. You go somewhere, anywhere, and let yourself feel everything you've been holding back. You're no good to them if you're destroying yourself from the inside out." It was the most sensible advice anyone had given him in 2 years, and the most impossible to follow. But the next morning, he found himself driving to the coast, to the beach house where he and Catherine had honeymooned, where they dreamed about their future. He spent the day crying, screaming at the ocean, cursing the universe that had taken her, grieving the life they'd planned and the woman he'd loved. And slowly, painfully, he began to accept what he'd been fighting. Catherine was gone. He was still here. His children were still here. Life, somehow, was continuing. When he returned that evening, he found controlled chaos. The children had convinced Riley to let them build a blanket fort that had taken over most of the first floor. They were having a camp-in, complete with flashlights, ghost stories, and s'mores made in the fireplace. "Daddy." Emma ran to him, chocolate on her face. "We're camping. Riley says we can sleep in the fort tonight. Can we? Please?" He looked at Riley over his daughter's head. She smiled, and something in his chest unlocked. "Absolutely," he said. "In fact, I'm joining you. Make room for one more." That night, surrounded by his children's laughter and Riley's gentle presence, Marcus Ashford began to understand that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to carry the loss while still embracing the life that remained. The morning Marcus found Riley crying in the garden, his world shifted on its axis. She was sitting on the bench beneath Catherine's rose bushes, shoulders shaking, her usual composure completely shattered. He'd never seen her anything but strong, composed, unflappable. "Riley?" He approached carefully, as though she might startle and flee. "What's wrong?" She looked up, and her devastated expression stopped his heart. "Carlos died this morning. The boy with brain cancer I told you about. He was 7 years old, and this morning he just stopped breathing. His mother was holding him. He said he wasn't scared because he knew he was going somewhere beautiful. Then he was gone." Marcus sat beside her, this woman who had held his family together, who had been strength incarnate for his children and for him. "I'm so sorry. I know death is part of my job. I chose this work because I wanted to make children's final days better. But it never gets easier. Every single one of them takes a piece of my heart with them." She wiped her eyes roughly. "Carlos wanted to skateboard because he saw Oliver practicing in your driveway when I was on a video call. He thought your son looked cool. And now he's dead, and Oliver is alive, and the unfairness of it all is crushing me." She stood abruptly. "I should go. I'm sorry, this is unprofessional." "Stop." Marcus caught her hand. "Don't apologize for being human. Don't apologize for caring so deeply that it breaks you sometimes. That capacity for empathy is exactly why my children are healing. Why I'm healing. You witnessed our pain without flinching. Let me witness yours." Riley collapsed back onto the bench. "I can't do this anymore. Every time I lose a child, I tell myself I can keep going, but I don't know if that's true. And being here with your children, seeing them healthy and whole and full of potential, it's wonderful, but it also highlights everything my other kids will never have. Carlos will never grow up. He'll never fall in love or graduate college or have children of his own. It's not fair." "No," Marcus agreed quietly. "It's not fair. Catherine dying at 32 wasn't fair. My children losing their mother wasn't fair. Life is brutally, devastatingly unfair. But the fact that you showed Carlos joy in his final days, that you gave him the experience of skateboarding, that he died knowing someone cared enough to make his wishes come true, that matters. You can't save them all, Riley. But you make the unsavable moments more bearable. That's not nothing." She leaned against him, exhausted. "Your children asked me this morning if I could stay forever. Emma said I make the house feel like it has a mom again. I didn't know what to tell her." Marcus's heart hammered. "What do you want to tell her?" "That I love being here. That your children have become as important to me as any patient I've ever treated. That somewhere along the way, this stopped being a job and became something else entirely." She looked up at him. "But I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared of caring this much. Everyone I love leaves or dies. My parents died in a fire when I was 12. My fiancé was killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago. I chose to work with dying children because at least then I expect the loss. But your family, I didn't expect to love you all this much. And it terrifies me." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Marcus understood completely. Fear of losing someone again. Fear that happiness was temporary. Fear that opening your heart was just an invitation for it to be shattered. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. "I fought it for weeks because it felt like a betrayal of Catherine's memory. But she wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life alone. She'd want our children to have joy and love and a complete family again. And Riley, you've given us all of that. You've given us hope. I'm not trying to replace her. You couldn't. Catherine will always be their mother, my first love, the foundation of this family. But love isn't finite. The heart doesn't run out of room. And my children's hearts are big enough to love their mother's memory and to love you for who you are now. Mine is too. Riley stood and paced. This is crazy. I've been here less than 2 months. People will say I took advantage, that I manipulated my way into a wealthy family. Let them talk. I don't care about other people's opinions. I care about you. About us. About what we could build together. Marcus stood to face her. But I need to know if this is real for you too, or if I'm projecting my needs onto someone who's just doing her job. She stopped pacing and looked at him with those clear, honest eyes that had seen through his children's defenses from day one. It's real. Terrifyingly, complicatedly, inappropriately real. I look at you and see someone who survived the worst and came out kinder for it. I see a father who loves his children enough to keep trying even when he's failing. I see a man who visits his wife's grave every week and tells her about their children because love doesn't die just because someone does. How could I not fall for that? Marcus crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. Then stay. Not just as their nanny. Stay as part of this family. Help me raise them. Build a life with us. I'm still going to work at the hospital. Those children need me too. I wouldn't ask you to stop. Your compassion is what makes you who you are. He hesitated. But maybe we can do something more. The Ashford Foundation could fund a program, better facilities, more staff, resources for families. We could make what you do reach more children. Would you help me build that? Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but these were different. You'd do that. Catherine always wanted to do more charity work. We talked about it but never had the time. Let this be her legacy too. The Catherine Ashford Center for Pediatric Palliative Care. We'll make it the best in the country. Carlos and all the children you couldn't save, they'll help save others through what we build in their memory. Riley kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, they found 4 children standing nearby, having witnessed everything. Does this mean Riley's staying forever? Emma asked, hope bright in her eyes. Marcus looked at Riley, the question in his eyes. She smiled and nodded. Yes, sweetheart, he said. If she'll have us, Riley's staying forever. Sophia stepped forward, her expression serious. We need to establish some ground rules. First, no trying to be mom. You're Riley, and that's enough. Second, we reserve the right to occasional misbehavior. We're kids, it's our job. Third, family meeting every Sunday to discuss feelings and problems. Fourth, her voice cracked slightly, you have to promise not to die. I know you can't really promise that, but promise to try really hard not to die. Riley knelt down to eye level. I promise to try very hard not to die. And I promise I'll never try to be your mom. Your mother was extraordinary, and her memory deserves to be honored. I'm just Riley, and I love you exactly as you are. Even when we're terrible? Oliver asked. Especially then. That's when you need love most. Mason, ever the analytical one, had a different question. If you and Dad get married, would you want more kids? Would you love them more than us because they'd be yours? Marcus started to intervene, but Riley held up a hand. That's a fair question. Honest answer? I don't know if we'll have more children. That's something your dad and I would need to discuss with you for. But I do know that if we did, I wouldn't love them more. Love doesn't work like a pie where you get smaller pieces when more people show up. It's more like a fire, the more you add to it, the bigger and warmer it grows. There's enough love in my heart for all of you, for the children at my hospital, for any future children, and still room to spare. The children looked at each other, having some silent quadruplet communication. Finally, Sophia nodded. Okay. You can stay. But you have to come to Mom's grave with us sometimes and tell her about what we're doing. So she knows we're okay. I'd be honored, Riley said softly. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his living room, watching Riley help the children hang decorations for Catherine's birthday. They decided to celebrate it every year, to tell stories and look at pictures and keep her memory alive. It was Riley's idea. On the mantel sat a photo from the cemetery. Marcus, Riley, and the 4 children gathered around Catherine's grave, smiling through tears. Beside it was a newer photo from the groundbreaking ceremony for the Catherine Ashford Center. Life hadn't magically become perfect. The children still had rough days. Riley still grieved the patient she lost. Marcus still visited Catherine's grave every Thursday. But they were healing, together, building something new from the broken pieces of what was lost. That evening, after the children were asleep, Riley found Marcus in his study. She held out her hand. "Dance with me." He took her hand and pulled her close as music filled the room, not Catherine's wedding song, but something new, something theirs. As they swayed together, Marcus realized that grief and joy could coexist, that honoring the past didn't mean sacrificing the future, and that sometimes the most broken families could heal into something even stronger than before. The billionaire whose money couldn't solve his problems had found the answer in a hospice worker who understood that the most valuable things in life, love, compassion, healing, couldn't be bought. They could only be given freely, received gratefully, and nurtured carefully. And in a mansion that had once echoed with loneliness and loss, laughter rang out again. 4 impossible children had found their way back from darkness, guided by a woman who saw their pain and loved them anyway, and a father who learned that opening his heart again wasn't betrayal, it was the bravest thing he could do.